Hey there, this is Ari. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint podcast. In this episode, I am talking with essential oils expert Jodi Cohen on her top 5 tips to improve your energy levels. So welcome, my
Thank
friend.
you.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you, my friend. I know it's great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So I know you have a great presentation lined up for us today. You're going to be talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, and essential oils, and how that ties into energy levels. So
exactly,
I'm super excited to get into this with you. I know you have your kind of a 5 steps to superhuman energy. So
yes.
I will let you kind of take it from here and get into it.
So basically what I've noticed, I think we all kind of, if you have too many tabs open on your device, it drains the battery and it functions less optimally. And I think so many of us have too many tabs open kind of in our life. And there are some pretty low-hanging fruit, meaning the fruit that's the easiest to grab off the tree, things that we can do that just help give us more energy, because every distraction, every tab you close out of allows your computer to really use the energy that it has more efficiently. And so what I've kind of identified are the 5 easiest things that most people don't even think about. They're totally eating right, they're exercising, and maybe they're still forgetful. They walk in the pantry and they're like, why did I get here? Or they're carrying extra weight, or they just don't have the energy. They get tired, at 4:00, they either need some kind of coffee or they just can't focus. So they have to go on a quick run or do something so that they can sustain through the day. It's 9:00 and they're ready to go to bed. So the things I'll just share, spoiler alert, it's really kind of switching gears into the right state of your nervous system. And that's the most important thing. It's making sure that you're really getting restorative sleep so that you're sleeping through the night. It's making sure that things are flowing in your body. So the oxygen and glucose are getting into your brain. All of the toxins are draining from your brain and actually leaving your body. It's kind of supporting the organ systems and regions of the brain that help with your energy, your endocrine system, so your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals. And then finally, it's modulating your immune system. So often your immune system is either overreacting, so you have food sensitivities, autoimmunity, all these things, or it's underreacting. So you have this heavy viral load that's building up and it's really not being dealt with. So let's start with your vagus nerve and with your parasympathetic state. So for those of you who aren't familiar with your nervous system, there are really 2 states, and you might think about it like shifting gears on your bike, right? There's the state of, oh gosh, it's an emergency, and that could be the tiger is chasing me and I'm about to die. Or it could be I'm driving in traffic and the person 1 lane over is changing lanes and doesn't see me. And so what you do, your body automatically jumps into like, let's keep you alive mode. And so it mobilizes all of the energy, in the form of adrenaline or cortisol, so that you can, run really quickly. You either fight back if you can, you run really quickly, or you freeze, you immobilize, and hopefully the predator doesn't see you or thinks you're dead and goes on by their merry way. And then you're supposed to kind of toggle back into your rest, repair, and recovery state, known as your parasympathetic state of your nervous system. And what's interesting is when survival is prioritized, anything not critical to survival really shuts down. So that includes your ability to digest your food, your ability to detoxify, your ability to anti-inflame. It's interesting. Anti-inflame is interesting because if you're twisting your ankle when you're running, that could make you killed. So in the moment, it's basically short term, it helps with inflammation. If it goes on chronically, then inflammation starts to go rampant. And then also your immune system. So ideally, we're supposed to deal with our stress and then flip back into the state of repair and heal, known as the parasympathetic state. But what happens is that a lot of people get stuck in that stress state and they can't switch lanes back into the parasympathetic state. And so one of the easiest low-hanging fruit tools to help them get into the parasympathetic state is to activate your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10. And spoiler alert, it serves as the gear shift between your sympathetic fight or flight state and your parasympathetic rest and digest state. And I'm going to give you a quick anatomy overview because that will kind of help you understand how you can stimulate it and how you can switch from those two states. So it starts at the very back of your head at your brainstem and kind of wanders around by both sides behind your earlobe, and then kind of innervates your throat, your lungs, your heart, all of your organs of digestion, your whole motility wave, through your ability, your bowels. If you're constipated, that's often a really telling sign that you're stuck in the sympathetic state and you're not actually moving food through your body. And so really easy ways to activate it are anything that innervates the vagus nerve. It goes both ways. So it sends the signal from the brain to the body and the body to the brain. It's kind of your information highway. And this is one thing that's really important to how it functions. So if your brain isn't communicating, say, for example, hunger signals to your body or fullness signals to your brain, things get out of whack. It's almost like if you think about an accident on a freeway, right? It means that cars can't get through. And so the more you can clear up any miscommunication between the brain and the body, the easier it is for you to heal. Your brain is sending a signal, you're exercising and you're lifting a weight. The faster that brain signal gets to your muscle, the stronger you get and the more able you are to have the energy to sustain the workout, right? So what can impede that? It can be kind of chronic stress. The other thing that most people aren't talking about is toxicity. It can be a big impediment to this communication channel. And if you think about what happens, your mouth is kind of where the most toxins occur because it's one of the key barriers to entry into your body. And so things like pathogens, viruses, if you have a root canal that's a little infected or metal amalgams, all of those things are in the mouth and they drain along your trigeminal nerve, your jaw, and they can intersect with your vagus nerve right here. So it's kind of interesting. We know that root canals are correlated with heart attacks. Here's kind of the back into the story. What happens? You have toxins from your root canals that are infected. They drain along the trigeminal nerve, and then they intersect with the vagus nerve right here. And nerves are big receptors for toxins, and it's your vagus nerve that actually sends your anti-inflammatory hormone acetylcholine down and tells your heart rate to slow down. Your vagus nerve is highly correlated with your heart rate variability. So if the vagus nerve is now toxic and suddenly those signals aren't being sent, then your heart doesn't know when to slow down. So it's overworking, overpumping, and you're more likely to have a heart attack. So it's really important that we try to activate this vagus nerve. And anytime you're doing like meditation or gargling or doing deep breathing like you do in yoga, or even digesting your food, or a coffee enema is a really good way to stimulate your gallbladder, which is innervated by the vagus nerve. All of these things send a signal to your vagus nerve and start to stimulate it so that it shifts into that parasympathetic rest, digest, recovery state. Another really easy way, I created a blend of clove and lime oil. You can do it yourself, and you can just apply it right behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone. This is a really big acupuncture point. And what they're doing in acupuncture is they're kind of stimulating reflex points. You can use oils to stimulate reflex points too. You can even just run your finger, like kind of trace behind your ear. You can use your tongue like a paintbrush to paint the roof of your mouth. The main point I want to make is if you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed or low energy, sometimes just helping your body shift gears into that parasympathetic state will really up your energy. It's almost like if you've ever biked up a big hill, we've got tons of them where I live in Seattle, and you don't shift gears into the lower gear, you're just working a lot harder. And it doesn't need to be so intense. So just downshifting, shifting gears into the right gear, all of a sudden it's a lot easier for your body. It doesn't pedal the bike for you. It just enhances what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Quick question on essential oils. You mentioned applying that blend directly behind the ear.
Yeah.
There's mixed information that I've heard around, applying essential oils directly to the skin.
Yes.
Do they need to be diluted with carrier oils and specific dilutions? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there are certain oils like lavender that can be applied directly to the skin. There are also different parts of the skin get into the bloodstream faster, right? So like pulse points like the wrists, behind the ears, get into the system faster. If you have any kind of cut or abrasion on your body, that's going to get into the bloodstream faster. If your skin is warm, like I just started doing the keto diet and they say always rub your finger before you do the prick test because it allows increased blood flow. So if you just got out of the shower, you just got done exercising, if you apply oils then, it's more likely to get into your system. For clove and lime, I do recommend diluting. I just recommend using equal parts and then diluting with at least a tablespoon or two. Dilution doesn't decrease the effect. It's not like more is more. All you're doing is just really using something that's super stimulatory and super small. And what I especially like about the clove and lime combination, if you think about before we had all of these modern medicines, clove was used in dentistry to really clean out the bacteria in the mouth. And so what's great is it gets in this area, and you almost might think of like a collision on a freeway, like say a truck is jackknifed in the middle. If the repair crew can get in there and start clearing things out, then things can flow a lot better. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to share about vagus nerve toxicity, there's a doctor out of Harvard, Michael Van Exler, who's talking about vagus nerve infection hypothesis. And his premise that has been getting a lot of momentum is that when the vagus nerve is infected, because the vagus nerve is signaling the rest of the body, it's almost overactivating your sickness response. And what happens in sickness response, if you're sick, you want to kind of downregulate everything, right? So you feel fatigued, you might get inflamed, you might have pain, so that you allow yourself, you're forced to really heal, But what happens is if this nerve is infected and it's sending out the signal that you're sick when you're actually not sick, it can be an overreaction. So that can present as chronic fatigue syndrome or multi-chemical sensitivity or fibromyalgia. So sometimes people who have been having those symptoms find that if they can stimulate their vagus nerve and calm the reaction to that infection or even heal that infection, the other symptoms dissipate.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So can you recap the main strategies you listed off there as far as activating the vagus?
Yes. The free and easy ones are use your tongue like a paintbrush on the roof of your mouth. Do anything you can to kind of rub behind your ears or rub along the side of your ears. Splashing your face with freezing water. Using a tongue depressor to gag yourself. Any kind of deep breathing, yoga, meditation, coffee enema, or essential oils.
Got it. Beautiful. And on the subject of essential oils, you mentioned a few: clove, lime, you mentioned lavender. Those are the ones you feel are best for activating the vagus?
Yeah, those are the ones that, it's really interesting because we work with a lot of practitioners and I've tested a variety of things. And actually, here's something that I will share. Originally, I thought because the parasympathetic state is the rest and digest state, I thought that calming it was the right strategy. And so we were testing a lot of calming oils like lavender and chamomile. And what we realized is the opposite is true. You actually have to stimulate it. So I would recommend the more stimulatory oils. Those are like the hot oils. Clove is very stimulatory and has a property called eugenol that has been found to test the highest for kind of antiviral, antibacterial function. Thyme and thimonol is also one that tests really well for that, but that's a little bit hotter, and for some reason clove and lime seem to get more people into that zen parasympathetic state. So people can try cinnamon as a hot oil. Oregano is a very hot oil. Just be careful with the hot oils, always dilute. And I don't love taking them internally unless you're working with a practitioner.
Got it. So I know you had 5 steps to superhuman energy. The first one was activate the vagus. What's number 2?
Number 2 is sleep, making sure that you're getting restful sleep, because sleep is when the brain actually detoxifies and heals. So many of the symptoms that we see presenting as like brain fog and fatigue are really mental fatigue. It's really that the brain has too many toxins. And so it's almost like it can't function as quickly because there's pollution in there. And so the more you can really allow yourself to get 8 hours of restful sleep a night, that's when the brain, there's this system called the glymphatic system that was discovered fairly recently. And they realized that when your brain is awake, it has to function. But when you're sleeping, it can shrink, and it's almost like a little mini car wash. It's called your glymphatic system, lymphatic, combined with your glial cells, which are brain cells. And the cerebral spinal fluid goes through the brain and through the crevices in the brain and gets rid of any environmental toxins along with your own metabolic toxicity. And then it drains down the side of your neck and ideally leaves your body. So drainage is the next step, but sleeping, making sure you're in a dark space. If you can get your bed a little bit away from the wall, then the electric circuitry of the wall won't interact with you. If you can sleep with your cell phone or device at least 6 feet from your head, if you can avoid interaction with devices and computers and any kind of artificial light. What triggers the release of melatonin, which is not only detoxifying and designed for sleep, is natural darkness. And so anything that impedes your exposure to darkness can impede the ability of the body to release melatonin. The other thing that can impact melatonin is your sleep hormone, and cortisol is your stress hormone. And so it makes sense that if you're worried about something, or if you think you're in danger, that's not the optimal time to fall asleep, because if you fall asleep on the watch, you're going to die. So what is interesting is that the body perceives any kind of anticipatory stress. So say that you're worried about something at work the next day, or a relationship, or finances, or anything. It triggers the same hormonal cascade in your body for stress that a physical stressor would. And so it's almost like a teeter-totter. So think of cortisol as high, that forces melatonin low. If you can bring melatonin up or cortisol down, that kind of calms the body and lets you go to sleep. So you can use essential oils to help activate the pineal gland, the part of your brain that releases melatonin, to release melatonin. And we have a combination, but lavender is actually a good one for that. The thing that's really key that I want to share is that your pineal gland is in the exact center of your brain, so that it can kind of measure right between your eyes the degree of light and impact it. So just applying things on the top of the head, above the ears, and the back of the ears, that really helps it kind of get into the pineal gland in the center of the brain, so that melatonin is released, you naturally fall asleep. Night waking is a different issue.
Now, just a quick question on that. So obviously a skeptic, someone who's very evidence-based, would say, by applying essential oils on the skin at the top of the head or behind the ears, nothing is traveling directly into the brain. It's
getting into the blood.
Yeah. So it's either getting infusing into the bloodstream,
right,
or there is a pathway through the nasal passageways that
exactly
somewhat of a direct route to the brain.
Yes.
But through inhaling the vapors. So
yeah.
But what's the
mechanism?
The sort of, like how would you say it to a skeptic, or someone who kind of would doubt that applying it here and here is more effective than, let's say, just inhaling it or applying it on your wrist or something like that?
Right. And that's a great question. It's very hard to get remedies into the brain because of the blood-brain barrier, which, acts like the intestinal barrier. It only lets really small fat-soluble molecules through to begin with. And so one of the reasons that I actually think oils are more effective than supplements or food, well, food is a different category. I think food can be very effective, but I think it's hard to get remedies into the brain. So let's talk about olfactory first. It's really interesting because, of the 5 senses which go into the brain, they kind of get channeled through your thalamus and then go to your amygdala. It's a big intake process where it's basically perceiving your environment to make sure that you stay safe. But what's interesting is your sense of smell goes immediately to the amygdala. It's the only one of the 5 senses that has that direct access. And what's also interesting is that your nose, your olfactory cells, are brain cells. And I'll get into this later, but for mental energy, your prefrontal cortex is what helps you focus. And your olfactory channel, cranial nerve number 1, goes directly to the prefrontal cortex. And in most cases, it's the right part of the brain that controls the left side of the body, but your olfactory nerve goes directly, right nostril goes to right brain. So if you're trying to balance right, left brain, that's a good way to go. In terms of getting into the bloodstream, what I've found and what we've been finding in clinical practice, which is interesting, is that if you apply, say, oils over the adrenals, so in that part of the body, it gets into the bloodstream in that area of the body and gets to that organ more quickly. So even though you're totally right, we have the cranium, but it gets into the system, and blood does flow. You know, we have hair and things that grow on the outside of the skull. So there is blood that kind of flows through it. Beyond that, it's a good question for skeptics. I guess what I would encourage them to do is try it and see if it works for themselves. And when it does, then they can then they can find all the science and research to back it up. But there is a lot of science about the olfactory channel and about this is my favorite science fun fact. There's a Nobel Prize researcher out of Seattle named Linda Buck, and she was noticing a fear-based odor stimulant. She was really looking at the olfactory receptors in the nose, and she identified the ones that smell predator odor, you know, the fear sensors. And then she took it one step further, and she was looking at what cancels that out, and it's the smell of rose essential oil. So that whole idea of stop and smell the roses, there's a lot of science behind that.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And on a personal note, rose essential oil is actually my favorite one. Maybe that's a little effeminate to say that, but I'll admit it. I really like the smell of roses.
It's amazing. And if you ever have, you know, I lost my son in a car accident, and that was my touchstone for survival. If you ever have like those horrible grief waves, or if anxiety plagues you, smelling rose or applying it over your heart, it works better than anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, what's the third step to superhuman energy?
Number 3 is drainage. And so if you think about it, any toxins that are lingering in our body that require our body to spend their energy on it, it becomes a physiological stressor. So the more we can help toxins leave our body, the more energy we free up in our body. So when you think about kind of how the toxins are supposed to flow, they go from the cell to the lymph, to the blood, to the liver, to the gallbladder, to the gut, to the toilet, right? And at any step in that process, it can get blocked and stagnant. The most obvious place that it gets stagnant is the lymph, because unless you're moving, which I'm sure a lot of the people on this that are listening in do, you really have to move your body to move your lymph. It's not like your heart that just pumps your blood. But oils in the plants, if you think about what oils do in the plants, they really are their immune system. They help to move fluids, they help to repel predators, but they're really great. They're what kind of help move, the water from the roots into the leaves that can be hundreds of feet in the air. And so especially mint seems to be the most effective. So spearmint is actually better than peppermint, which surprised me. But anything that you can kind of apply along your lymph channels. So main areas are the sides of your neck, over your left clavicle. Lymph actually does not flow equally. It flows 75% more on the left side. So even just helping the left side move, even just massaging over the left clavicle, can help your lymph carry toxins, especially from your brain, which if they hang out too long in your brain, it can cause inflammation, and that can lead to a lot of energy issues. So anything you can do to help your body move toxins out, anything you can do to activate the parasympathetic state, kind of moves motility. So constipation is a really big challenge if you're trying to eliminate things, because it just recycles things. So even just if that's your issue and you can start getting your system moving, that frees up a lot of energy.
Yeah. Beautiful. So as far as practical tips for detoxing, for getting
practical tips for lymph, moving, number 1, rebounding, jumping on a trampoline, dry brushing. And there's an interesting technique to dry brushing. What you want to do, you want to kind of start close to the skin and like just do small movements and then slowly move away. Dry brushing helps to kind of get the lymph moving. Essential oils, spearmint is a great one. You can do a combination. Spearmint you should dilute at least by half. Anything hot, like getting into the sauna or red light therapy, all of these things are really great strategies for moving your lymph.
Yeah, now you're speaking my language with sauna and red light therapy.
Yeah, but that's what you're doing. I mean, it's just sure. You're freeing up energy because you're letting your body get rid of the stuff that it doesn't need.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a digression, but I'm sure you're familiar with Gerald Pollack's work. And
he's a friend. He's in Seattle.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know how light, especially in the infrared part of the spectrum, interacts with membranes and the water near membranes to actually facilitate water flow. So the vessels, the lining of the vessels um, has interacts with the water in such a way that it creates what he'd call easy water, structured water.
Yeah.
And light interacts with that such that it grows this layer of easy water and facilitates the flow more efficiently. So things like red light therapy and sauna, infrared sauna in particular, are things that we would expect to massively enhance lymph flow for sure.
And you know what's interesting? There's kind of this layering technique. Like I bet you notice this too when you're eating right and taking the right supplements and exercising. It's better than just doing one in isolation.
For
So
sure.
I would really encourage people to think about like activate your vagus nerve while you're in your red light sauna. Just try layering some other techniques on top because I bet your results will amplify.
Yeah, absolutely. What's number 4? Step 4 to superhuman energy.
Step 4 is really looking at your endocrine system, especially your hypothalamus and your adrenals, because those are the organs that if you think about kind of your energy hormones, adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, those are all, I'm sure most people know this, but it's your hypothalamus pituitary axis. It's a little bit of a, passing the baton system. So your hypothalamus is the controller of your endocrine system. It also works with your autonomic nervous system. And it's really the CEO kind of the brain. It's assessing, okay, what are the blood levels of this? What do I need? And it's always taking in information and responding to information. So when something stressful is going on, it triggers the hypothalamus to then trigger your pituitary gland. And all of these signals are sent through hormones to tell your adrenals, release more cortisol. We need more energy. And then what happens, it's almost like it's called a negative feedback loop. It's like a thermos mechanism in the body. So the hypothalamus is monitoring what is the level of cortisol, what do we need, and at a certain point it realizes we're good, we can stop production. And often it's the hypothalamus that isn't necessarily getting signals or is kind of overwhelmed by too much information. And so it's telling the adrenals, keep releasing cortisol, even though there's sufficient cortisol in the system. And what happens often, there's some debate over if adrenal fatigue is a real thing or not. But what I do see in the practice is if the adrenals are chronically releasing cortisol, they kind of overfunction until they don't. It's like your bank account. You can deficit spend until you kind of hit, you've taken out too much money and sorry, there's no much money there anymore. And so what you want to do is you want to both support your adrenal glands and also support upstream your hypothalamus. And so this is where oils and plants in general, I think, are really great. One thing that we know from supplements and glandulars, you can do things to either, raise up, okay, we want more cortisol in the system, or kind of down regulate, we want less. And it's almost like pick one or the other. But anyone who's ever looked at their cortisol levels, you can do a simple saliva test and kind of measure levels throughout the day. I've never seen anyone who's flatlined. They're either like usually too high in the wrong places and too low in the right places. And so you can try to guess with supplements, take this in the morning, take this in the afternoon. Most people struggle with compliance because life is busy and they forget. Or you can use adaptogenic herbs. And what adaptogenic herbs mean is that if you're too low, they bring you kind of up to the right level. If you're too high, they bring you down to the right level. They just kind of help you stay in balance no matter where you're at. And so you don't need to be so careful about or meticulous about the timing of day and things like that, because they just kind of bring you back into balance. I found that essential oils do the same thing. And so you can use your oils kind of on your low back over your adrenals to help you get back into balance. You can also use oils, especially the hypothalamus. If you smell something, the amygdala and the hypothalamus are pretty closely connected. And so it's almost like, your phone glitches and you need to reboot it. I've noticed that you can use oils to help reboot your endocrine system so that it goes back to normal. It's not that oils are hormones. They don't pretend to be hormones, but they seem to help the hormonal system kind of return to balance so that it can then release the right hormones into your body.
Mm-hmm. What oils do you think are most effective in doing that?
For the hypothalamus, it's interesting. Blends do different things than single oils. So we've found for the adrenals themselves, I'm going to mispronounce this. I always do galbanum, GALBANUM. That is a really good one. It seems to work better when
I've never heard of that one.
It's kind of amazing. It's really it's like one of the hidden secrets. I can send you more research. Actually, there's a lot of that in my book. But it works nicely with cinnamon. And then for the hypothalamus, it's a combination of like bay rum and frankincense. Frankincense is good for most of the brain. It has this quality called sequestrins that people kind of, basically the end result is it brings more oxygen into the brain. How it does that is kind of misunderstood, but it does help carry oxygen to the brain. And one other point I should back up, black pepper, you would always dilute it, but that one is really great for kind of vascular expansion. So if you think about how fluids travel in our body, they travel either through, mostly through our veins. And if we can kind of increase the surface area, that they get to go through, we can carry more of the oxygen and nutrients into our system and more of the toxins out. So Tatis Karazian always puts black pepper into his supplements because he finds that they amplify the assimilation between 2% and 400%. So that's a really good one that especially if your nose is always cold or your hands and feet are cold, just, using black pepper oil diluted, but that can help a lot with movement in the body.
Mm-hmm. And what's number 5?
Number 5 is immune modulation. And this is a really big issue today, with autoimmune issues and things like that. Our immune system almost gets stuck in the wrong gear. Again, it's overreacting or it's underreacting. And so just returning it to balance helps your body work with you, not against you. And oils are great for this. This is kind of what people who know nothing about oils know, that they're antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial, because that's what they perform in the plants. Like they talk about frankincense all the time for being really good for wounds. It's a resin. And what resins are, it kind of, it's like a scab almost on the plant. And so it makes sense that it performs the same function in humans. And hot oils in particular, getting back to red light saunas, anything that you can do to heat your body helps with the healing process. So some oils like peppermint's hot, eucalyptus is hot, clove, cinnamon, nutmeg, oregano, thyme. The reason there's this great story that people like to tell about thieves during the bubonic plague. They were stealing the teeth out of dead people's mouths, and yet they never got sick. And so when they were apprehended, they were offered a plea bargain in exchange for telling them how they didn't die. And it turned out they were wearing scarves with a combination of these hot oils over the respiratory system. This actually helps the coronavirus, is spread through the respiratory system. So these hot oils can help kind of, it's not that they heal you, they just amplify, they turn up the ability of your body to actually function in the immune function. Just like red light therapy really turns on, it optimizes your body's own ability. Putting these hot oils either on the bottom of your feet where you don't necessarily need to dilute because the skin is so much thicker, or if you're, feeling a scratchy throat, you can dilute with even, cooking oil, coconut oil, olive oil, castor oil, and put over the throat, or just kind of smelling it or putting it, if you're going to wear a mask, on the inside of a mask. It just helps to put your immune system in the right gear so that it doesn't overreact or underreact. You can also use it, if you think about the first line of defense in your immune system, it's your barriers, right? Your sinus barrier. So blue tansy is an amazing oil to really modulate your sinuses. You can put a little bit of a Q-tip in there and use it as like nasal irrigation, or just to help modulate your response to mold or environmental toxins. You can use eucalyptus is a great one for your lung barrier. Anything you can do to really support your lungs. For a digestive function, fennel, ginger, peppermint, all the ones that we have kind of known forever, that really helps your gut. It's just one other tool that you can use.
Beautiful. So let's recap. You've got 5 strategies for superhuman energy. Just quickly go through and list them all out.
Yeah, it's just 5 things that you can add to what you're already doing. So stimulating your vagus nerve, helping to ensure that you get restful sleep, ensuring that you have good flow of drainage of toxins from your brain and oxygen and glucose into your brain, supporting your endocrine system to really boost your energy hormones, and then finally modulating your immune system.
Beautiful. Jodi, thank you so much for coming on. This has been excellent. I've loved to hear this connection, especially with the vagus nerve stuff. I think is fascinating, and how that interacts with essential oils. And I think you've put the pieces together there in a really fascinating way. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey there, this is Ari again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you found it valuable, please share it with your friends, share it with your family, help me get the word out there. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell to get notifications every time we release a new video or new episode of the podcast. And if you're listening to this, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for supporting my work at The Energy Blueprint. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you in the next